June 6, 1944, D-Day. When we picture the landings at Omaha Beach, we see the iconic images of American soldiers struggling ashore into a hell of machine gun fire and explosions. We know their story of courage and sacrifice, but what was it like for the men on the other side? For the German soldiers inside the concrete bunkers, watching this apocalypse unfold and unleashing it themselves? This is the story of D-Day through their eyes. The men defending the coastline of Normandy were not, as is often believed, old men or unwilling conscripts. At the sector the Allies codenamed Omaha, the primary unit was the German 352nd Infantry Division. This was a battle-hardened formation, recently transferred from the brutal fighting of the Eastern Front. They were a mix of grizzled veterans who knew the cost of combat, and young, indoctrinated recruits ready to die for their homeland.
Target acquisition
They
is
were
almost
not an
complete.
elite force, but they were a competent and dangerous one, and they occupied what was perhaps the most formidable defensive position on the entire Normandy coast. For months, their life had been one of tense, grinding routine. They dug trenches, laid millions of mines, and sighted their machine guns and mortars on every conceivable inch of the beach below. The geography of Omaha was a defender's dream. A wide, open tidal flat leading to a steep 100-foot bluff. From their concrete bunkers, known as Wider Stance Nester or Resistance Nests, they had a perfect, plunging field of fire. They were confident in their Atlantic Wall, a fortress designed to throw any invasion back into the sea. The German High Command was convinced the main attack would come at Calais, the shortest point across the Channel. Normandy, they believed, was a secondary concern. In the pre-dawn darkness of June 6th, the world exploded. A colossal Allied naval and air bombardment rained down thousands of tons of explosives. The ground shook, the air crackled, and the defenders of the 352nd huddled deep inside their bunkers, praying for survival. But when the terrifying barrage lifted, they emerged, shaken into a strange, misty quiet. Due to the low cloud cover, the bombers had missed their targets, and the naval shells had largely fallen short. The bunkers and the men and weapons inside them were almost completely unscathed. As the sun began to rise, the mist over the English Channel began to burn away, and through the haze, the German soldiers witnessed a sight that defied imagination. The sea was not empty, it was black with ships. An armada of over 5,000 vessels had materialized out of the dawn, an endless forest of steel masts stretching to the horizon. It was a moment of sheer, terrifying awe. There was no longer any doubt, the invasion was here. Soon, the smaller landing craft began their run to the shore, tiny specks growing larger, packed with men. The German commanders waited, holding their fire, letting the Americans come closer into the heart of their pre-sighted killing zones. Then, the order was given. For the next few hours, Omaha Beach became a perfect, methodical slaughterhouse. The German machine gunners, peering through the narrow slits of their bunkers, opened fire. The MG-42, known as Hitler's buzzsaw, spat out over 1,200 rounds a minute, a terrifying, ripping sound that echoed across the beach. They watched as the ramps of the landing craft dropped, and the American soldiers inside were cut down in neat rows before they could even step into the water. Those who made it to the sand were trapped with nowhere to hide. Mortar shells, fired from positions hidden behind the bluffs, rained down with chilling accuracy. From the German perspective, it was a surreal, horrific shooting gallery. Men like Heinrich Severloh, a machine gunner at Resistance Nest 62, would later recount firing for 9 solid hours, switching out glowing hot barrels, unleashing over 12,000 rounds of ammunition into the waves of men below. It was a mechanical, brutal, and sickening task. They watched as the tide, red with blood, washed over the bodies of the fallen. For a time, it seemed impossible that anyone could survive. The German defenders, inflicting such terrible casualties, believed they were winning. They believed they might actually repel the greatest invasion in history. But the American soldiers, despite the unimaginable horror, did not break. They just kept coming, wave after wave, landing craft after landing craft. For every man that fell, another seemed to take his place. The sheer, overwhelming number of the enemy was a psychological weapon in itself. Then the tide of the battle began to turn, due to one critical factor the bunkers could not defend against: the United States Navy. Realizing the catastrophe unfolding on the beach, Allied destroyers made a heroic, desperate decision. They steamed dangerously close to the shore, risking running aground, to bring their 5-inch guns to bear directly on the German bunkers. They acted like massive sniper rifles, firing with pinpoint accuracy. For the men inside the concrete emplacements, it was a terrifying new hell. A direct hit from a naval shell didn't just kill, it obliterated the entire position, turning concrete and steel into dust. One by one, the key German defenses were being silenced by the guns of the fleet. On the beach, small groups of American soldiers, led by determined officers and sergeants, began to find small gaps in the German fire. They blew through the barbed wire and began the slow, agonizing climb up the bluffs. They started to infiltrate the trench lines, attacking the wider stances not from the front, but from the flanks and the rear. The battle turned from a long-range shooting match into a brutal, close-quarters fight with grenades and rifles. The German defenders now found themselves in a desperate situation. Their machine guns had fired for so long they were running out of ammunition. Their positions, designed to face the sea, were being attacked from behind. Communications were cut. Each bunker was now an isolated island, fighting its own private, hopeless battle, and the reinforcements they so desperately called for never came. The powerful panzer divisions, the only force that could have driven the Allies back into the sea, were held in reserve miles inland, awaiting direct orders from Hitler that came far too late. By the afternoon, the German defense at Omaha Beach, which had been so murderously effective just hours before, began to crumble. Bunkers were overrun. The surviving soldiers of the 352nd Division were either killed, captured, or forced into a desperate retreat inland. For the German soldiers who had watched the invasion fleet appear at dawn, D-Day had been its own unique kind of hell. A morning of horrific, one-sided success, followed by an afternoon of complete and utter annihilation. They had manned the front line of Fortress Europe, and they had been erased.